In episode 2, we explored Dr. Ligoure's arrival in Nova Scotia. When Dr. Ligoure arrived in Nova Scotia, his work as a physician quickly expanded into advocacy work, especially during the First World War. To better understand the leadership and internal dynamics of the No.2 Construction Battalion, we spoke with Mary Beth Sutherland. Mary is a community advocate and historian and the granddaughter of Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Hugh Sutherland, the battalion's commanding officer, who advocated for Black men to be appointed as chaplain and medical officer. Mary's reflection raises a critical question. If Ligoure was qualified, trusted, and present, why was he still sidelined? And most importantly, why did he not receive the appointment of medical officer?
I'm Mary Beth Sutherland, and I'm from Shawn. And my granddad was Daniel Hugh Sutherland, who went on to become Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Sutherland. So, and he also was from John originally.
And he was the lieutenant in No.2 Construction.
That's correct.
So him and Dr. Clement Ligoure obviously had a direct connection in that sense, right? So, what were any stories that were shared or passed down from your grandfather? Do you remember anything? You said your grandfather passed away when
I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And I'm ashamed to say that I don't recall a whole lot of what he said. You know, I knew a little bit, like I knew we had a trunk in the house.
Right.
And this trunk has a little bit of a story. So
please go.
Anyway, after Granddad died, I was going through things in his house, and I said to my parents, "Oh, look at this trunk, all painted." Well, I got it out and I got the inside painted. And there was some writing on the outside. You know, as a stupid teenager, you try to correct these things. It was much later in a better light. I looked at it. It says No.2 Construction Battalion on the top. And I had put it back under the eaves. And it was some years later when George Bordy mentioned about the 100th anniversary coming up.
Right.
I never made any connection with the date. So I started going through these and I really looked and it says No.2 Construction Battalion. Oh, yes, I do remember this now. But thank goodness I didn't paint the outside. I just painted the inside.
Right.
But, you start going through the house because it was my grandparents' home. And then you start finding, picture here, picture there.
There's little artifacts.
Yeah. And, some papers. And then there was the shells they used during the First World War to do art work out of them. So my granddad made a couple of these. It was the top of the shell and made them into vases for my grandmother.
Oh, really?
But they think they did this in the trenches. I think it was called trench art.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. I would have not to look to take them down.
That's awesome. Well, we can maybe, that would be really interesting to see as well, too. I think one of the things, too, is about, your grandfather's role also in the No.2, but it was at a really interesting time because this was the first time that we saw resistance in terms of having Black participation in the war specifically, right? And so one of the things that I found fascinating was that your grandfather actually recommended Dr. Clement Ligoure to be the medical officer of the No.2 Construction Battalion. And there was, I believe, Reverend Andrew White as well too. And then I read something about how the recommendation was really strong. So your grandfather seemed like an exceptional person. What do you think his thoughts were on having Dr. Clement Ligoure as, why it was important to have him as a medical officer with the No.2 Construction Battalion?
My thought is it was a battalion raised for Black men.
Yeah.
But all the officers were white. And maybe even Granddad didn't think it was totally fair.
Right.
So his ambition obviously was to have a couple of officers that were colored.
Yeah.
I think he felt there would be more empathy with the men and the men to some of the officers if they were someone of their own race was part of it.
Yeah.
And I think you have to look at equality. And, my granddad, with his background, he had worked in construction and engineering.
Okay.
So I think he could recognize someone's character.
Right.
And he had worked with men of, different races.
Yeah.
So you have to recognize that everyone is equal.
Yeah, and he was a medical doctor, right? There weren't too many black medical
Well,
doctors
that's what
at the time, right? So you would think that he would be a natural fit, right?
Yes.
And what's always surprising is that at the end of the day, what happened was that he was declined, right?
Exactly.
And I'm not at any fault of your probably grandfather, but it was probably the higher ups within the military. And I said, going through some of the research, that there was still a resistance to having a black medical officer in there, right? Because the time frame at that point would have been roughly around 1917. So Ligoure would have just finished his medical degree not too long ago in that sense, right? So it's really interesting. But he recognized that and so I think there's also this perception that back then that there wasn't anybody that had that empathy to understand that, oh, wait, if we're gonna, I often think about having a black medical doctor, right? But I've never had a black medical doctor, but having that representation piece is really important, right?
Yes.
And if you don't have that, I often think about being in the war, who knows the kind of practices at that point in time from different medical officers as well, too. I do remember hearing something about, not wanting to serve alongside the white soldiers as well, too, right? And how that would create some animosity as well, too, right? So they thought they were doing a disservice in that sense as well, right?
Well, you look at the time, I know Captain Tupper in Westville, he had quite a few black men come to volunteer.
Yeah.
But he couldn't accept them. Not that he didn't want to accept them. He couldn't find a position for him because so many of these commanding officers wouldn't accept those of other races.
Yeah.
Even First Nations signing him on. They had a hard time.
Well, that's the other thing that when I talk the Indigenous community and more broadly too, there was individuals that did serve in the war, but it's very difficult for them to get in as well too, right? So it's really impactful in that sense, and knowing Dr. Clement Ligoure's work leading up to that as well too, from the recruitment side of things, going across the province to recruit individuals as well too.
And I think I'm sure I know he was a military recruiting.
Yeah.
So he traveled across the country.
He was in Ontario, New Brunswick, and through Nova Scotia as well too. The funny thing is talking to, Hal Davison, we're having a conversation about that. And one of the things that keeps coming up is that there's so many individuals that are part of No.2 Construction Battalion that were involved with the church.
Yes.
So he was actually probably going to the church. And one of the connections I found out is that Hal Davis's great uncle was a pastor at the Disney Chapel in Yarmouth. And he was succeeded by my great grandfather.
That's marvelous.
It's
those connections.
And it's those connections, right? Yeah. So, but to think about that in the sense of Dr. Clement Ligoure, he was building this kind of network of individuals that were, that would go on, and we talk about life after the war, but these individuals were going back into the community, whether it's through spirituality or, the day-to-day stuff as well, too. One question I did have, I didn't think about this, but what did your grandfather do when he came back after the war?
Well, I looked at some of the papers and that, and you follow a person's history. So before the war, he was very involved in railway building, and he had his own company.
Right.
War breaks out. He and my grandmother in Saskatchewan. He's working on building some of the. I think it was Prince Albert. Maybe he was working.
Okay.
War comes. These contracts are they're having to put aside. Men are leaving to go fight. So he sold the company, came back east, went to the telegraph station in Kansas until he got enlisted, and then got an officer's course, etc. But when he came back, I think a lot of the men did find that they were a bit lost after his coming back. So with one of his brothers, he formed another construction company.
Okay.
He lived in Moncton for a while. He was up in northern Ontario for a while.
Okay.
He was doing geological work. He was mining.
Okay.
He was prospecting.
Right.
I I found another spot that he was then in New York doing real estate. He went to Mexico. He was doing more mineral exploration. And then he came back. I don't know what, he came back to Nova Scotia. And I think he started farming his father's old farm.
Okay.
So, in some ways, he had an unsettled life. I found that afterwards. So there's my grandmother and my grandfather died they married about 1912.
Okay.
And they immediately went out west where he was working. War breaks out, they come east. They don't have a house.
You're right.
My Nana has to then live with her in-laws, with, the family, because her parents had both died at that point. So she didn't have a family home to go back to her own. So she's living with my great-grandparents. And, so everybody was so affected in some ways by the war and on things went. So they never actually had their own house until they came back to Nova Scotia and they went back to the childhood home.
It's one of the questions like even I had about like the war breaking out and like just the impacts that it's had. You just gave me a really good description on how that impacted families, right? And so one of the things that was, one of the things that we continue to find out is like, especially for the No.2 Construction Battalion, Black individuals that came back, we don't know much about what happened afterwards. It's interesting to see that, but one of the similarities is that they all had, when they came back, it sounded like their lives weren't easy, right? They couldn't just pick up the pieces and just continue on with their lives, right? They were all impacted, probably PTSD, all kinds of things, right, from the war. And I should clarify too, because I always forget the No.2 Construction Battalion, they couldn't bear arms. They were there to build railroads and construction, and that was their primary focus because of some of the government practices at that time, right? They didn't want to arm Black individuals at that time in the war.
Which is very, very sad. But I know that Granddad did volunteer, even after they were in France, that they would go to the front line. And he started training them with guns.
Oh, that's interesting.
And then word came back from higher up, cease and desist.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Get back to work.
Really? That's interesting. It's funny because when we talk about France, I often hear my dad talking about France and the war and things of that nature. And it's pretty remarkable. You come from a military family, right? And you're able to preserve and continue this history, right? I had my great-grandfather was World War I. My grandfather was in World War II as well, too, right? Man. Yeah. So it's been pretty impactful for me as well, too.
I'm going to say this, even though it doesn't exactly affect you.
City.
Anyway, they had a band.
I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll go a little back to this. I know it.
Tell me more. Because Doug's run talked about the band.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Granddad probably thought he was going to make this battalion more not inclusive, more well-known than it should have been. So, as they said, he wanted a Black medical officer, he wanted a Black clergyman.
Yeah.
Then his other ambition was to have a brass band. Well, you're not allowed to have that. That's what he was told. That wasn't stopping him. So he had a cousin who had the Willis Piano Company in Montreal.
Okay.
His cousin had grown up at Piano too. So he had this company in Montreal, and Granddad said to my guess that he was going to get himself a band. So he contacted his cousin and said, can you get me some good used instruments for a band? And then he contacted another friend of his, Harry McLean, and he said, Harry, I need some money. Harry and Granddad had worked together in railway building, and Harry had done very well.
Okay.
He'd come up from the States, and they had worked together in different projects, and they knew each other through those circles. Anyway, so poor Harry, his wallet was much later by the time that war was over.
Yeah, yes, it was.
Phone up and say, I need some money. So he told Harry he needed money, and his cousin found the instruments.
Okay.
Got them shipped out. Harry sent the money, and then he sent, I think it was McLean, one of his officers, up to New Brunswick to recruit. St. John's had the St. John's brass band.
Okay.
McLean recruited most of that band. He took the band and the whole, because he wanted a good band. And then I was reading another gentleman, was it from New Glasgow, Andy Ganesh? He came to be part of the band. Anyway, this band was very popular. They used it here in Canada for recruiting purposes.
Yeah.
When they got to France, it was in much demand for military events, but even events that were in the community to celebrate France's birthday. It's not the word I'm looking for, but celebrate the day that the Republic was formed, which is July 1st, maybe.
Okay.
Somewhere along that. So they were asked. I have a couple letters that town officials said, "Would you please come and bring your band?"
So interesting. I mean, Dunk's talked about the band and how kind of the band was kind of sought after, right?
Yeah.
He said, well, can you hear the music? Like how well that band would have been. And, I think that's really the other side of it too. Like, but the solidarity that happened amongst them, really, right? Bringing everybody together in that sense, right? And even in the time of like war, it's pretty grim. But at the end of the day, you can find like good music solves a lot of problems for a lot of individuals.
So they play gospel.
Yeah.
At a church service.
Yeah.
They could entertain. They did this. They entertained their officers at Christmas time.
You're also making me think about Dr. Clement Ligoure's kind of path as well too. Some of the research we're finding is that like he was kind of like he was pretty involved in the community in general, but he had a pretty active social life. But a lot of that also revolved around like dancing, music, things of that nature as well too, right?
Yeah.
So I think sometimes we put this in kind of in a box where we don't really we can't really normalize these people, but they love these things. These are the things that kind of kept everything flowing at that.
Well, that's it. Kept the spirits of men. Because, when you're in desperate situations, you need something to uplift you.
Yeah. That's, and I think one of the things too around the contributions is like, wouldn't it, my next question is around the contributions for the number 2, but I think that band needs to be recognized for their contributions as well too. And I know you're actively involved going to like Pictou and Truro with regards to the number 2, but why do you think it's now more prevalent for us to start talking about the number 2 Construction Battalion as we're finding out more information about the communities? But just your thoughts on that. Why it's taking so long, so to speak?
I think it probably took the 100th anniversary to really bring it into focus. George Wharton was a huge, supporter of having it recognized. And then you have Calvin Rock, taking that time, interviewing so many people.
It's very cool.
Exactly. And then he started it just after my granddad had died. And it was too bad. But that's time.
Yeah. I think my grandfather died just shortly after as well too, just after he was interviewed as well too, right? But there was a lot of it comes down to time. And I think as time goes along, I think you start getting more of, like you said, George Wharton, who I'm not familiar with at this point, but I'd like to know a little bit more about George in that sense. But I think it's also this community bringing these, stories up, sharing these stories, right? And that's how you start to get a little bit more, I guess, social impact in that sense as well too, and moving some of this stuff along as well too, right? So in terms of your contributions from your grandfather, is there anything you would like to see with your grandfather that hasn't necessarily happened?
Well, my grandfather was probably one that, you don't have to blow your own horn or anything like that. But it's nice. I know he would be very thankful that the men that he felt were very important are now finally being recognized.
Yeah. It's essential, right?
Yeah.
You recognize those individuals, right? But didn't necessarily get that recognition at that time. It's really important. One of the things I often ask individuals too is like, how is this the No.2 Construction Battalion, but even being part of this project, Dr. Clement Ligoure, how's that experience? Because I know you do a lot of work. You're talking to individuals in the community. How's that shaped your own experience as well, too? Because sometimes people say, well, you know, this isn't my history to share and so forth. But I love the fact that most individuals I talk to in the African Nova Scotia community have been in contact with you. So I love that you're doing some of this advocacy work.
Well, I think it's important because obviously my grandfather felt it was important. We have papers that were military papers, which you've got in the museum. Anyway, that I don't know if he should have hid them, but he did try and give them to museums and that. So he died in 76. And
Okay.
he had tried to go to different museums and give these papers. Oh no, we're not interested. Well, we don't have space for it or anything like that. So what he had kept all these years just stayed in the house.
Right.
But for him, it must have been important that he kept these papers and didn't throw them out. And he had pictures that he didn't throw out. But obviously he didn't get them all to the military when they get through.
Right.
Maybe he felt it would get brushed aside.
Yeah, get erased, right?
Yeah.
Because it's part of the history. One of the things, too, is even with Dr. Clement Ligoure, he's finding all of these records, and at least through the military records, we're able to find some things, but it's all really scattered. So we're, kind of, to compliment Emily, she's doing a lot of research with regards to finding these things and like scouring papers, things of that nature. But one of the things too is like the eraser of the history. I think that's one of the most important things. And the project is to highlight the history, right? And I think the other thing too is sitting down with you, something you said it will be perfect. We don't want this to be perfect. We want this to be sold through like a community lens as well too. But it also starts the conversation a little bit more intentionally. I'm sure we're going to find more things out as we go along with Dr. Clement Ligoure, but also the No.2 and that switch, right?
Oh, that's it. Do you want me to read what he had written?
I would love for you to read some of that stuff. I mean, you brought this here, so we might as well utilize some of this, right?
I didn't sticky tape. Let me clean that.
I'm going to just share this with you.
Okay.
It's so interesting. I'm having flashbacks with my father and how he approaches history and genealogy. Similar kind of approach when, they got the big binder and you get all these papers, and I love it, right?
Well, I figured after a while I was going to have some organization.
That's perfect.
Because it was getting pretty.
Yeah, I would love for you to read anything that you think significant from there.
Actually, I'm going to read a little bit. Our McLean wrote this, and I don't know what all the years it signify. So it's from St. John, New Brunswick, August 10th, 1916. So he has gone up to New Brunswick to recruit. And before this happened, there was a group of, I don't know if it was 22, that had gone to enlist in, I think it was Sussex. So this is after it happened. Let me see if I can find. This is the right letter. I have spent my time organizing and advertising our work in this province. I had no idea that the feeling would be so strong against us here. It is because of the fact that 22 fellows were signed on here by the 104th Battalion, and after they were taken to Sussex, they were refused with the words, "We do not want you fellows here. Get back to where you came from." Now, it is this difficulty with which I have to contend, but nevertheless, I'm working among the leaders and trying hard to get them back to the fold, and thus far I have landed about 19 men. The two fellows that I'm sending tonight are Bushman and McIntyre. And he goes on to say that when they get to Nova Scotia, he wants them put in uniform and send them right back.
Okay.
So then he can get them to enlist, because they will know more of the people. So that was written by McLean to Granddad. And, here's the next day. I'm sending forward 16 men, including 6 men from Fredericton tonight. The St. John's Brass Band, colored, is going to play these fellows to the station, and I have made arrangements with the ladies of the city to prepare lunches for the men. So I consider they will receive a suitable send-off and therefore should have no kick to advance. Terminology is a little different, maybe.
Yeah, well, then not so. Well, I got the terminology. Send them right back.
Yeah.
Go back to where you came from.
Let's see what else I can find here. Okay, this is one that is written by Granddad to Captain W.A. McConnell, 2nd Battalion. It's in the Toronto Detachment.
Okay.
In your letter of September 5th, I enclose my letter to the editor, Canadian Observer, for my signature. Since writing this letter, which I forgot to sign, I have met 2 colored men whom I recommend for commission, namely Reverend Mr. White, a colored clergyman in Truro, a very superior type of man. Dr. C.C. Ligoure, a graduate of medicine from Queen's University, is the other man. He is highly recommended by Dr. D. Gordon, president of Queen's University, and I was much impressed with the personality of Dr. Ligoure that I am pleased to recommend him as a junior lieutenant, and when the colored men respond in sufficient numbers to require medical officer for No. 2 Battalion, I am sure that Dr. Ligoure will get the appointment.
He was so certain.
Yeah. But they would.
It speaks to volumes about what kind of individual he was, right?
Yes. Let's see if there's anything else here.
I'm pretty sure he was like disappointed as well, too.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So I can, let me see if I can get it through that. Actually, here. So he's done a list on December 31st, 1916.
There he is.
Yep. He's listed as officers. Or, yeah.
Yeah.
So he really thought he was going to get it. But why isn't he on there?
No, he's not.
I think it was in around February or so that he.
That's so interesting. You've done a great job with records.
I've tried. So
It's hard because then you get so much, and then it's like,
well, it gets a little overwhelming.
it sure does.
So I get others. And let's see. Okay, now this is written from Truro, February 17th, 1917. It's written to Harry F. McLean, who was at Ottawa at the time. I put an application to be sent overseas the first or second week of March, and I'm afraid this work of removing steel will hold us back, as it will take about a month yet to finish the work. Do not say anything about the appointment of colored officers. The request to have a colored M.O. and chaplain was refused, but I don't want this made public yet, just to avoid any agitation by Dr. Ligoure.
Right.
So he must have realized this was going to upset Ligoure, which is...
And probably more broadly, the community in general in that sense, right?
Yes.
Because if you can't get even, like, you're going into battle, right? This is the way I think into war. Everybody should be equal. Right? We're all on level playing field. We're all going to die, right?
Now, Granddad also used the Canadian Observer and the Advocate to recruit.
Yes.
And they were both very popular among the Black community, is my understanding.
Devoted to the interests of color.
That is correct.
Active advocate, yeah.
Now, this is another thing. This is February 28th, 1917. Dr. Ligoure.
Mm.
He ordered his uniform.
Interesting. He was getting ready to go.
He was.
He was getting ready to go. And I saw, how old would he have been at that time? Because he's a young man. So, how old is he? In his 20s, right? So it's pretty exceptional, right? I just think, like, to be a medical doctor at that time anyways, right?
Yeah.
Can I see that again? Oh, yeah.
So he obviously had ordered it. Well, back on September 25th, 1916. So he put down the money.
Sergeant trousers, breeches, belts, stars, cap, stars. British war badges. Badges were $3.50. Isn't that something? So look at that. I credit paid by cash $60. So he's still
That would have taken a lot of money at that time.
Well, this is one of the things we keep having conversations about, like the Black middle class at that time. So we had that conversation with Grant Nickerson last week, but Dr. Clement would have had some money right?
He would have had more than some of the others.
Exactly,
Because of
right.
his background. But I know, and enough spot Granddad wrote to the army, said, we need supplies.
Yeah.
These men are coming. They don't have anything.
Yeah.
And I saw another point that I think there was a couple men that weren't accepted. It must have been over medical issues.
Right.
And I think he had to give them money just so they could get clothes to get
Right.
home
Yeah.
because they just didn't have it.
Well, that was one of the things I think I was talking to Hal, his great uncle. They first refused him. They said he was
Too short?
Too short vertically.
Yeah.
Yeah, too short. Right. And there was something else. And then I think he ended up, kind of disputing it and so forth. And then he eventually got in. But that's kind of the similar practices, right? Like, so
Yes.
like there's no real clarity around why Ligoure couldn't become the medical officer. We know that he was had a strong recommendation. Then all of a sudden you think he's going to be a medical officer and then he's declined. But there was also, that's what's happening to the individuals that just wanted to enroll,
Yes.
right? Whatever the reasons would have been, right? Like, I think saying somebody's too short, that's interesting to me, right? So there seems like there's all of these little unwritten rules or practices that continue to manifest in certain ways, right?
Well, that's it. How can you be too short to shovel? Because obviously that's what they were aiming.
That's what they're aiming for, right? They're lower to the ground anyway, so that shouldn't be an issue, right?
Let's see. I can find something else here. Yeah.
This is amazing. Like, that's a lot of research.
Well,
How was your time in Cumberland?
oh, good.
Good?
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hal's a good fellow, so
Yeah,
And
Hal's, Hal's shared a lot of information with me as well, too. So really impactful. I've seen that picture before.
oh, so that's the band, and
That's the band.
yeah. And Granddad was the
the
one. Granddad actually is the officer who took the salute that day. So that might be him. I did take him for pictures too. So this is a knob story.
Have you digitized this stuff?
It's supposed to be done,
Yeah.
not by me though.
Yeah. Yeah, well, no, I was thinking about the digitizing of this, right? Because this is one of the things that happens is a lot of stuff goes in books and things of that
I'll
nature.
talk to him from you after.
Yeah. See what,
Oh, yes. So I was going to say, how we perceive people. So this is just an example in France. So apparently some of the other battalions, I think probably got a little bit of a beef against the No.2. So they wanted to break them up. And they were being sent to another area. They said, oh, it must be too cold for those men. They were used to a warm climate.
right.
Granddad was very annoyed with that because they put them in an open train car to travel in the winter.
Who does that?
Yeah.
Well,
Like, that it had them so.
other ways you do racism. Yeah, that's interesting. My grandfather, when he was in World War II, he ended up in Germany. And my dad tells me the story about like him being billeted with a family or something like that sense. But they were so afraid of him because they thought he had a tail. Like those are the kind of things. Those are them misstringing over there, but those are the kind of.
You think, why would people think that? It's so.
It's all about just the messaging that's really powerful, right? And I mean, who would think that you would be in a war and if the next person to you didn't look like you, but they're going to save your life? No, I don't want this. I don't want them to save my life. Like, I'd rather die.
Okay, fair. Received from Lieutenant Colonel D.H. Sutherland the sum of $10 being money advanced for the purchase of civilian clothing for, let's say who it is,
Yeah.
Windsor, Ontario. Because
Versa.
so obviously he needed clothing. Another area that, he's saying, well, there's no towels or anything. These men are coming with nothing, he says.
You've been finding a fair amount of stuff in the Canadian Observer as well. Right?
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, Louise, what's that?
What did you find recently in the Canadian Observer?
There was quite a few articles. There was a letter written by the Black community in Windsor, Ontario, voicing their dismay that Ligoure was not given the medical officer position.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Somebody stood up to them.
Well, piecing this a lot of the puzzle together, we can see that he had a lot of reach.
Well,
You know,
he
like,
worked
that's-
hard with alongside the others. Oh, now here's one. It's not what I was looking for. This is from the Honorable. Oh, it's to the Honorable F.B. McCurdy MP, Ottawa. Dear Sir, on October 5th, I sent you the following wire. Moving pictures, Birth of a Nation, will be shown under the management of Clyde W. Curry, October 11th to 14th, Favorite Theatre, Windsor, Ontario. Colored people here consider it most insulting to them. Will affect recruiting No.2 Construction seriously. Would recommend that for military reasons, this film should not be exhibited in Windsor or any other part of Canada.
Yep. Do y'all know about Birth of a Nation?
I don't.
No. It's white supremacy to a T. Like,
Oh, really?
there's no other way. Like the Birth of a Nation. So they piggybacked off of it. I'm paraphrasing some of this, but like Graham often talks about the Birth of a Nation, how that continued the pattern of what some of these racist tropes and anti-black racism. And so that's why they're telling them, don't
Get
play
rid of
that, because black people at that time, there was a huge social movement against that, right? And I think that in that story, Matt, that I sent you a while ago, there's a specific section Graham talks about the Birth of a Nation, about how that's impacted things. And basically, the title of the Birth of a Nation is a Ku Klux Klan member on a horse. Like, yeah. So that's why. That's really interesting, and that gives some context to the talk.
Right.
I like the fact too here. It's it's care of the golf club.
Yes.
So yeah, that's it.
So that was October 6th, 1916.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because like then you see the Atlantic Advocate pop up again here, right? And how that the Atlantic Advocate was, so influential in terms of the recruitment for the No.2 Construction Battalion, right? And not just locally, but across the country, right? Probably globally as well too, because there wasn't too many black publications at that time, right? I don't think I understood the magnitude of the Atlantic Advocate. Even until now, looking at these ads and seeing it, here, like 1916 in that sense, right? You see, is it to be Beta, right? It's pretty cool. Wow.
So they were supporting,
Yeah.
publications that would appeal to people, but they realized the importance of that.
Yeah. That's
Oh, you go ahead. You can flip through it all. But Ligoure was harder just following some material on him on Brandon's papers because he wasn't there that long. Obviously, he had a respect for him if he wanted to take him overseas. Oh, yes, because then I think on February 15, 1917, Ligoure was given leave to go back and get his family and take them down here to get them settled before he went over. And they were the only battalion to do military work in Canada before they went over. So they needed rails for frames because they were running out of material over there.
That's right.
So they were sent up to 3 sites in New Brunswick to lift rails. January, February, March. The ground was frozen. It was terrible. And so there was, 200 of them sent. They were needed for war work. And then Granddad had a real
You need to
sense of discrimination because he said, my men are up there working. We're not getting paid for this. But the CN or whatever it was, CN, whichever the railway was at that point, I'm sorry, I can't remember. They were paying the government. So when Granddad heard that, he wrote to a friend of his, probably McCurdy, and said, do something about it. Give us money. He said, we need canteen money and that. There's things that these men need. And then they were sent up. They didn't have medical doctors or nurses. And at least one man died up there of pneumonia. So he said, you have to give us people. So then they had to upgrade, and they weren't just in boxcars, they were in boxcars. I can't remember. They had, but I mean, the conditions were pretty primitive.
I believe went off topic.
I'm sorry.
But that's all.
It's
all really valuable. And I think you answered all. We'll be answering all the questions anyways, but this is really valuable. I'm like, it's just, my final question really is like, why is it important that we share this story?
Well, they have to be recognized. They served a purpose. If these men didn't do what they did in the First World War, then the folks in the front line, they couldn't have done what they did. They were a key component of the war effort.
And that's why we need to do this, because it's been erased. Yeah. And that, but it won't be erased.
I guess I should have taken pictures. I'm sorry. Because when they got there, when they got to Ligoure, they had to build their own camp. They set up their own water systems and electrical systems, the whole bit. And then they were sent out to work. And well, mostly, or a lot of them in the forestry aspect. And it might be in there, but there is a note from somebody else. He said, if I had your men, they could outdo, I don't want to say what outgroup, but well, French Canadians maybe it was, but they could outwork and they could bring in the top numbers sometimes of all the production in the timber.
This is good because this is stuff from, I don't think we have this stuff, but this is from Hal, from the, some more ads. Recruits wanted AME Church to meeting tonight. And again, it's been referencing the brass band will be in attendance, right? So this band was obviously drawing a lot of people. And so this is, Hal's done a lot of research.
Oh, yes.
Well, it's funny because Hal's like, I don't think I could talk on it. I'm like, gosh,
well,
I'll pull it out of you. Don't worry.
The interesting thing was when Hal and I sat down, we started talking.
Stuff. Very good.
Hal, his mother's people came from River Hibbard. My grandmother was from River Hibbard. So we figured probably the families knew each other. Granddad worked in that area when he was working on the railways, which is how I'm sure he met my grandmother. And when he and his brother were building, well, they had done some railways, but they built the Amherst Dam. So when I went up there last year to take part in this play with Hal and, quite a few other descendants of the No.2, Hal told me to show me the dam that my grandfather had built.
And it's pretty nice.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information in here. You think about the amount of lives that he saved during the Halifax explosion in assets. I mean, what was he servicing? Up to 200 individuals a day?
Yeah.
At the Amanda Private Hospital, that's his own hospital, advocating to get more staff. But that's the real impact that he had. So maybe it was foreshadowing. Maybe him not going to the war maybe that was the reason why at the end of the day that he stayed behind, right? So a huge impact, right?
And at least the man who went in his place was, I think, another advocate for the community.
Well, I just think too, it's like the whole legacy around that. And, my great grandfather was in that No.2, but all of the work that he did, like that's not going in vain, lost in vain, because their legacy is being recognized as an integral part. But for an individual to have their hands on so many things, what an exceptional individual, that would have been. So it's really, for me, it's really a privilege to be able to honor his story, try to, bring more light to it as well, right?
Inspire the next generation,
Absolutely. Well, there's still that whole thing around underrepresentation, right? That we continue to talk about the lack of, having Black doctors or Black medical professionals in that sense, and there's a need to do that. So hopefully the story inspires if you need to.
Well, that's it. I think you probably feel more comfortable with someone who is similar to you.
Yeah.
Probably understands you more.
Well, your lived experience, right? And that's the biggest thing. I often kind of joke, I use the analogy about in work, go for interviews, but how many times have I been interviewed? by somebody that looks like me. Like, that's right.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. Like if you go to, there's a reason that there's inequities in our health system and things of that nature because you don't have the representation. So this can help lead individuals down that path. And I'm all for it. Awesome.
Oh, it's been most interesting.
This has been great.
Thank you for listening to the Dr. Clement Ligoure podcast. The Dr. Clement Ligoure podcast is made with the support of the John Bragg Award in partnership with Association of Nova Scotia Museums, Africville Museum, and the Black Culture Center. The podcast aims to educate, preserve, and deepen our understanding of African Nova Scotian heritage while highlighting the stories of individuals who have shaped Atlantic Canadian history.